The Motel Guestbook has a warning beside my name. I'm standing in that narrow motel hallway again, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the light that buzzes so loud it fills your ears. I'm holding the Guestbook in both hands, and my fingers are slipping because my palms won't stop sweating. The cover is damp like it's been sitting in steam. I flip to the page with my name, the one I signed when I checked in, and the ink looks older than I remember. But right underneath it, in thick black strokes, there's a line I didn't write. Do not let him in. He knows your room. I don't know what hits me first, my stomach dropping or the sound at the end of the hallway. A slow, heavy knock against the metal door, one hit at a time. The kind of knock where someone isn't asking to come in. They're waiting. The peephole on the door closest to me darkens, like a thumb pressed over it, sliding across in a slow scrape. Then it lifts, and I hear breathing. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like the person on the other side is inches from the crack and listening for how still I'm standing. I keep staring at the warning beside my name. It wasn't there before, it wasn't there when I fell asleep. I wish I could tell you that night made sense, that something clicked into place, but it never did. All I know is that someone, or something, added that line while I was in the room, and that knock, it didn't stop until I ran. Let me tell you how any of this even started. At the time all of this happened, my life was pretty forgettable. I was 27, driving delivery routes for a regional supply company that paid barely enough to cover rent on a one-bedroom apartment with beige walls and a leaky faucet. Most days were long stretches of highway, gas station coffee and podcast to stay awake. I was single, tired, and honestly just drifting. The job wasn't terrible, but the hours were brutal, and the company kept adding new rural routes that pushed drivers out later and later into the night. That week had already been a mess. 2 trucks broke down, a shipment got sorted wrong, and I'd been sent 3 hours in the opposite direction to fix someone else's mistake. By the time I wound up anywhere near Highway 63, the sky had already folded into this heavy grey that promised rain. It smelled like wet leaves and diesel every time I stepped out of the truck. I remember thinking I'd make it home if I didn't stop for anything longer than 5 minutes. But around 9:30 p.m, dispatch sent one last delivery that absolutely had to be done tonight. It was a tiny town tucked behind miles of pine forest. I didn't even know it existed until that moment. By the time I finished, it was close to midnight, and the rain had started to come down in those thick, slanted lines that hit the windshield like gravel. The wipers smeared the glass more than they cleared it. The roads out there aren't lit, just 2 black lanes and trees pressing in from both sides. I tried driving home anyway, but after about 20 minutes, the truck felt like it was skating on top of the water. I hydroplaned twice. The second time, I felt the back-end fishtail, and my heart shot into my throat. I pulled over and just sat there, gripping the wheel, telling myself I wasn't going to die over a bad paycheck. That's when I saw the motel sign glowing through the rain. A faded neon motel stacked vertically, half the letters flickering. Below it, a smaller sign read, "Rooms available," in a flickering cherry red. It looked like every cheap roadside motel you've ever passed and never thought about again. 2 floors, concrete walkway, doors painted dull brown. A couple of trucks were parked crookedly along the edge of the lot, engines still ticking from long drives. Everything was drenched and shining under the weak lights. The lobby smelled like old carpet and reheated soup. A little bell sat on the counter, but I didn't need to ring it. An older woman shuffled out from the back room before I even opened my mouth. She wore one of those faded floral blouses and had a deep voice that sounded like she'd smoked longer than I'd been alive. She didn't smile. She didn't ask why I was there so late. She just slid a key across the counter and said, "Room 12, down the hall." Her voice cracked a little when she said the number, like she wasn't sure she wanted to say it out loud. I remember noticing the guest book on the counter, one of those big old register books with frayed corners and a worn leather cover. I only saw it because she moved it aside with the back of her hand to reach for the key. The pages looked filled with different dates, names from different states, little comments about stays. Nothing strange, just old, historic even. I signed my name without thinking. When she handed me the key, she paused, just for one heartbeat. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway that led to my room. I thought she might say something, like a warning about the heater or the door sticking, but she didn't. She just watched me tuck the key into my jacket and said, "Stay warm, the storm's only getting worse." I walked down the hallway, the carpet squishing slightly under my boots. It smelled like bleach and humidity, like someone had cleaned too quickly and shut the doors before anything could dry. The lights overhead flickered once, but I was too tired to care. At that point, all I wanted was a hot shower, a bed, and maybe 6 hours of sleep before getting back on the highway. If you've ever stayed in a cheap motel on a stormy night, you know that feeling. You're exhausted, alone, and just hoping the place is clean enough that you don't have to think about it. That's exactly where my mind was. No paranoia, no fear. Just a long day finally ending. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. Nothing about that night felt unusual yet. But looking back, there were little things I brushed off, that should have told me this wasn't just another motel stay, the kind of details that only make sense when you know what's coming later. The first night should have been nothing. I was so drained I could barely see straight. So after a quick shower in a bathroom that smelled faintly of mildew, I crashed onto the bed with my damp hair still dripping onto the pillow. The rain outside tapped against the window in this jittery, uneven rhythm, and the old air conditioner hummed like it was trying its best with what little strength it had left. The room wasn't comfortable, but it was dry and warm, and that was all I cared about. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound that didn't match the storm. It was softer than thunder, sharper than wind, a single footstep right outside my door, a slow press of weight onto old carpet, then nothing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. I tried to tell myself it was just another guest, maybe a smoker pacing outside or someone coming back from the machines by the lobby. Motels are noisy. People move around at weird hours. It's normal. But the hall had this quiet, insulated feel to it, like it wasn't used often. I hadn't heard a single other door close or open since checking in. I rolled over and listened harder, another step, closer this time, right up to my door. The peephole glowed faintly from the hallway light, and I could see its circle brighten as something moved past it, like a shadow drifting across the lens. I almost got up to look, but something about the stillness in the hallway kept me frozen. There was no shuffle, no cough, no keys jingling. Whoever it was stood there for several long seconds, not moving. The air conditioner clicked off suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. The shift in sound left the room too silent, the way it feels when power goes out and you suddenly hear your own breathing. I sat up, annoyed more than scared, and walked over to the unit. The button stuck earlier when I tried turning it on, so the fact that it had turned itself off annoyed me. I pressed the switch again, pushing harder until the old machine buzzed and sputtered back to life. When I glanced at the door before turning back to bed, I could have sworn the bottom of it looked darker, like someone was standing in front of it, blocking the light in the hallway. But by the time I blinked, the darkness shifted back, and the light underneath stretched evenly again. I told myself I was overtired, that's all. I finally fell asleep again, though it took longer than I want to admit. The next morning, the light coming through the thin curtains was pale and watery. I opened the door to grab the breakfast bag they said would be on a stool outside, but the first thing I saw wasn't food, it was the Guestbook. It was lying on the carpet directly in front of my door, open to a page I didn't recognise. I actually stepped back because it looked so out of place, like someone had set it there intentionally. At first I thought the owner had dropped it, or maybe another guest accidentally left it while checking out. But when I picked it up, the page it was open to wasn't from last night, it was from weeks ago. Old names, old dates, nothing to do with me. I flipped backward until I found my signature, and that's when I noticed the faint indentations underneath it. Tiny grooves in the paper, like someone had written something directly on the page below mine and pressed too hard. The top page had been carefully torn out, leaving just the marks behind. I ran my fingers over the indentations. They didn't match the pressure of my handwriting. These were deeper, angrier. I told myself it was just a mistake. Maybe a previous guest got carried away while writing some comment. Maybe the owner was reorganizing old pages. Maybe I was reading into things because of the weird footsteps last night. I left the book on the stool, took my breakfast bag inside, and tried to shake the feeling that someone had been right outside my door while I slept. But that was the moment, looking at those indentation marks, when the first thought crept in that something wasn't right about this place. The kind of off feeling you can't name yet, but it sticks to you anyway. I didn't know it then, but that guestbook was going to keep showing up, and the footsteps weren't going to stop. The second night should have been easier. I kept telling myself the footsteps were just some other guest. The guestbook thing was an accident, and I was letting a long workday get into my head. I even tried convincing myself the storm made everything feel worse than it was, but lying to yourself only works when nothing else happens, and things didn't stay quiet for long. I heard the footsteps again a little after 2 in the morning. Not wandering this time, not pacing, just arriving. Slow, deliberate steps that ended right outside my room, stopping so close that I could see the faint shadow of 2 shoes through the slit at the bottom of the door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock or the sound of a keycard in the lock, anything that would tell me it was just a person doing something normal. Nothing happened. Whoever it was just stood there. The air conditioner clicked off at almost the exact same moment. The sudden silence made my skin prickle. I hadn't touched the controls since the night before, and the button still stuck when I pressed it. There was no reason it should be shutting itself off at the same time 2 nights in a row. I stared at the digital clock on the nightstand. It read 2:19 a.m. I didn't know it then, but that time would become familiar. I got up and walked to the door as quietly as I could. You know that feeling when you're scared someone might hear your heartbeat? That's how it felt. When I finally leaned close enough to look through the peephole, all I saw was darkness. Not a figure, just something completely blocking the lens, like they were standing inches from the door with their head tilted forward. I didn't see an eye or a face, just black. I stepped back, hard. I whispered through the door before I could stop myself, asking if someone needed something. No answer. The shadow didn't move. I ended up backing into the bathroom, shutting the door and staying there until I heard the footsteps again, this time leaving, fading slowly down the hallway. When I cracked my door open 20 minutes later, the hallway was empty, the carpet flat. No signs anyone had been there at all. The next morning I went to the front desk to ask the owner if anyone else was staying in my hallway. She barely looked up as she told me I was the only occupied room on that side. The rest were waiting for repairs. I asked what kind of repairs. She didn't answer. She just cleared her throat and turned away like the conversation was over. Walking back down the hall, I saw the guestbook again, this time on a small table near the vending machine. It was open to the page where my name was written. Directly under it was a blank line, clean and empty, like someone was waiting to write something there. I checked the counter where it usually sat. The space was empty. That blank spot under my name bothered me all day. That night I didn't even try to sleep. I sat propped against the headboard, half watching some home renovation show at low volume, half listening to the hallway. I wasn't sure what I expected, but at 2:17 on the dot the air conditioner clicked off again. Right after, the footsteps came back. 3 knocks followed, slow, steady, spaced far apart. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. Then silence. The knocks weren't loud, they weren't frantic, they were patient, like someone who didn't need to force anything because they had all the time in the world. I finally said something again through the door, louder this time. "Hey, stop messing around." My voice didn't sound like mine, it sounded thin. No reply. The shadow under the door stretched out again, stopping right across the length of the threshold. I reached out a hand and rested my fingers on the doorknob. It felt cold, colder than it should have in a heated room. I didn't open it. After what felt like forever, the footsteps retreated. Same slow pace, same careful placement of each step. When I eventually slept, it was only because my body gave out. The third morning, I found the guestbook leaning against my doorframe, like someone had stood it upright and balanced it carefully so I'd see it the moment I stepped out. The page under my name now had faint smudges along the edge, like someone had brushed their fingers there, deciding whether to write something or not. If you've ever felt someone standing right behind you, even when you know the room is empty, that's what the whole motel became to me. Every hallway, every corner, every inch of that place felt like it was waiting for something to happen, or for someone to make a move. By then I knew something was wrong. Not weird, Not motel creepy. Wrong. Wrong in a way I didn't have a word for. And it was only going to get worse. The storm that night didn't feel like weather. It felt like something beating its fists against the world. The rain came in sheets so heavy they sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown at the window. Thunder rolled in long, angry stretches that shook the thin walls of room 12. By the time I shut the curtains, the parking lot lights were flickering, turning everything outside into jerky snapshots of wet pavement and bending trees. It was just before 2 in the morning when the power dipped for the first time. Not fully out, just a long, low flicker that made the lamp beside the bed dim to a dull orange glow before returning. I was sitting upright, shoes still on, because sleep wasn't happening anymore. I had this feeling in my chest, like the air had thickened and I couldn't quite get a full breath. Every instinct in me was telling me something was coming. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. At 1:58 a.m, the hallway lights outside my room buzzed once, then went dark. Not all at once, one light at a time, in a line, moving toward my door. I watched their glow disappear through the crack under the door, each bulb snapping out with a soft pop. The darkness crawled down the hall like it had weight, swallowing each patch of yellow light until there was nothing left. The air conditioner clicked off at 2:17 exactly, like it had been waiting. Then came the footsteps. They weren't slow tonight. They weren't patient. They landed with this heavy, dragging weight, like whoever was out there was tired of waiting. Each step came closer, shaking dust from the vent and making the thin metal door tremble in its frame. I pressed myself against the far wall, gripping my phone so tight the case creaked. When the footsteps reached my door, they stopped abruptly. I didn't move. I don't even think I breathed. 3 knocks followed. Hard. Precise. Each one made the frame jump. Knock, knock, knock. My heart pounded so violently it hurt. I dialed the front desk, but the phone didn't ring in the lobby. It rang somewhere behind the wall, muffled and wrong, like the line had been rerouted into a dark, empty room. No one picked up. Then, through the vent above the bed, I heard someone whisper my full name. Not loud, not shouting. Soft, like they were inches from the other side of the metal, like they were testing how close they could get to me without touching me. I froze. The voice wasn't familiar. It didn't sound like the owner. It didn't sound like anyone who should know my name at all. A scraping sound came next, paper sliding across carpet. Something was pushed under the door. I crawled toward it without meaning to, my body moving on its own. It was the Guestbook. The page with my name had new writing underneath it, fresh ink still shining in the dim light. He's inside. A loud crack hit the bathroom door behind me. I whipped around. I'd closed that door earlier, locked it even, but now it creaked open an inch on its own, a dark sliver widening like something inside wanted to come out and join the thing outside. I backed up to the centre of the room, not sure where to look because danger felt like it was closing in from every direction. The knock started again, but not from the hallway this time. From the closet. Same rhythm, same slow spaced thuds. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't even think. I just bolted for the door, yanked it open and nearly slipped on the wet carpet outside. As I slammed it shut behind me, something hit the door from the inside, hard enough to rattle the handle. I sprinted down the hall blind, the darkness swallowing me as the storm outside howled like it was being torn apart. The lobby lights were flickering wildly, buzzing like a swarm of angry insects. The woman at the desk was gone. Her chair was pushed back, still spinning slightly. The front door was open, swinging in the wind. When I looked out at the parking lot, illuminated only when lightning flashed, I saw a figure standing at the far end, completely still, facing my room, head tilted slightly like they were listening. The rain hit them hard enough to bounce off their shoulders, but they didn't react. They didn't move at all. I didn't stay long enough to see if they turned toward me. I jumped into my truck, slammed the door and tore out of the lot so fast I felt the tyres slide on the water. The last thing I saw in the mirror was the motel shrinking into darkness, and that figure, still watching room 12, even though I was already gone. I didn't stop driving until I hit dry pavement at the edge of town. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Whatever had been in that motel, I knew it wasn't done with me. I didn't even go home that night. I drove straight into the next town over, parked in a Walmart lot, and sat there until the sun came up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every time a car passed or a truck door slammed somewhere in the distance, I flinched hard enough to make my teeth clack. When the world finally got a little brighter, it didn't feel any safer, just more exposed. I told the truth at the police station, or at least the parts I could say out loud without sounding insane. I said someone followed me, someone knocked on my door, someone messed with the Guestbook. The officer behind the desk raised an eyebrow and asked which motel. When I told him, he leaned back in his chair like I'd just mentioned a name he hadn't heard in a long time. He said they'd drive out and take a look, but he didn't take notes, and he didn't ask for details. The guy gave me this look like he already knew whatever I was describing wasn't going to lead anywhere good. A day later, he called to say the hallway I'd stayed in was closed off. Maintenance issues, he repeated. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no staff on the property. He asked if I was sure I even checked into room 12, because according to the owner, who wasn't there when they arrived, that whole wing hadn't been booked in months. I stopped answering his calls after that. I switched shifts at work to avoid night routes. It made money tight, but I couldn't bring myself to be out on the highway after sunset anymore. I moved to a new apartment closer to the city, one where I could hear neighbours through the walls, where the hallways were bright and busy. For the first time in years, I liked the sound of people close by. It made me feel less targeted. But sleep never really came back the same way. Every vent, every knock from upstairs, every creak of pipes made my chest tighten. Some nights I woke up sure that someone had whispered my name in the dark. Not loudly, not a shout. Just a soft, testing little sound, the same way I heard it through the motel vent. I tried looking up the motel online, thinking maybe other people had posted reviews or stories. Nothing. No website, no social media. The only picture I found was an old, washed-out image from years ago. The place looked brighter, newer, almost cheerful. Not the rotting, flickering place I'd stayed in. I don't know if it changed over time or if the photo lied. For a while, I convinced myself I'd imagined most of it. Trauma scrambles things. Exhaustion does weird things to your mind. I repeated that to myself until the words lost meaning. Then a package showed up outside my new apartment door. No return address, no tracking label, just my name written in the same shaky handwriting I'd seen in the Guestbook. My stomach fell so fast I had to lean against the wall. Inside the box was a piece of torn paper. The edges were jagged like someone had ripped it straight from a ledger. The paper was old, yellowed a little, the same kind the motel used in its Guestbook. When I held it up to the light, I saw faint indentation lines. Someone had written on the page above it, pressing hard enough for the grooves to bleed through. I didn't want to read it. I stood in my kitchen for a full minute staring at it, knowing I wouldn't be the same after I looked. It said, "Next time, answer the door." If you've ever gotten a message where the sender shouldn't know where you live or what you did or what you didn't do, that sick, cold feeling that crawls behind your ribs, that's what hit me then. I dropped the paper and backed into the counter so fast a jar fell and shattered on the floor. I don't know who sent it. I don't know how they found me. I don't even know if it was a person. But I do know the handwriting matched the pressure I felt under my name in that book. Like someone had been waiting to finish the message the moment I ran. I tried throwing the paper away. It reappeared under my doormat the next morning. I burned it in the sink. I don't know if that stopped anything, but it hasn't shown up again. Still, every now and then, late at night when the building settles or the pipes shift, I hear a pattern I can't forget. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. And for just a second, I swear it's coming from inside the walls. I think about that place more than I want to admit. Not because I'm still afraid of the motel itself, but because I can't shake the feeling that I never really left it. That night lives somewhere behind my eyes, like a bruise you forget about until you bump it again. I tell myself it was a person, some stalker who knew how to move quietly and enjoyed messing with strangers who looked tired enough to be vulnerable. That explanation should be comforting. It isn't. The truth is, I don't know what was in that hallway. I don't know who whispered my name or how the Guestbook kept ending up at my door. I don't know how that note found my new apartment. But something out there knew exactly what room I slept in, what time I woke up, and when the air conditioner would shut off. Something was patient enough to wait outside my door 3 nights in a row, like it understood my routines better than I did. I've changed the way I live because of it. I don't stay in motels anymore. I always keep a towel shoved in front of the vents in whatever room I'm sleeping in. I don't open the door unless I can clearly see who's on the other side, and even then, sometimes I hesitate. People laugh about being scared of dark hallways or empty hotels, but they don't know what silence feels like when it's watching you. What sticks with me most is the Guestbook. The way my name sat there alone with all those open spaces beneath it, waiting. I think about how warnings aren't always loud or obvious. Sometimes they're scratched lightly into paper, or whispered through a vent, or tapped out in a rhythm that follows you long after you've left the place where it started. A couple months after everything happened, I stayed in another town for work. Nothing remote, nothing creepy, just a normal business hotel. They didn't have a guest book, but they had a welcome journal in the lobby, where people scribbled notes about weddings or long drives. I told myself not to look. I told myself it didn't matter. But I looked. My name was written on one of the pages, same handwriting as the note, same pressure in the paper, and next to it, in small slanted letters, just 3 words. He found you. I shut the book and walked out of the lobby without checking in. And ever since then, whenever I hear 3 slow knocks, on a wall, on a pipe, on a neighbour's door, I feel this cold bloom in my chest. Because I know those knocks aren't always meant for the person who hears them. Sometimes they're meant for the one who's trying not to.